It's a late summer afternoon in Michigan, just outside the Detroit metro area. A teenager is cutting the lawn for his dad. The mower breaks down, so he heads up to the corner store to grab a root beer as Dad fixes the mower. At the same time, a sadistic predator, later dubbed the real Norman Bates, has just entered the neighborhood, trolling for his next victim. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and true crime author. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. There was something that struck me as I began working on today's episode. An undated photo from the 1980s of 13-year-old Shawn Moore, whose dirty blonde hair is combed straight with a noted part just off to the left side. The picture reminded me of myself. Do any of you remember those boxes of black combs sitting on the school photographer's table during picture day? As we waited in line inside the auditorium for our class photo to be taken, we were all given one of these combs, a 10-cent piece of plastic, and then we were told to make sure our hair was near damn perfect. And so there we stood in line, fighting with this comb through our hair, messing around with our friends, being told over and over to be quiet. So I guess what I see in Shawn's photo is that period of time when all that mattered was riding your bike, your friends, and hanging out under the streetlights on the corner until dark. There was no pressure of social media, no real video game addiction other than Atari, Asteroids, or Space Invaders. TV was really about reruns of Brady Bunch and Bewitched, and after-school specials warning that if we smoked weed, it would destroy our lives. And those were juxtaposed with the PSAs of an egg frying in a pan, a surly voice telling us the egg was our brain on drugs. The boy in that photo, Shawn Moore, lived in Livingston County, Michigan, a town called Brighton. This is in the Detroit, Warren, Dearborn metro area of the state, a large population of people. The Horizon Hills subdivision in Green Oak Township, which is south of Brighton, however, was a tight-knit, smaller community of maybe 5,000, northwest of Detroit. These are suburban neighborhoods surrounded by the busy areas we see when we think of the big city. All considering, August 31st, 1985 had been one of those routine Saturday afternoons. Shawn decides to take his bike, and man, did we go everywhere then on our bikes, and head out to the local convenience store up the road to grab one of his favorite sodas, a root beer. He had been cutting the lawn when the mower broke down. His dad came outside and started working on it. Shawn said he'd be right back. He then hops on his bike and heads up Whitmore Lake Road. It was a gas station/store about 10 minutes away on Lee Road. This is a trip Shawn had made dozens of times before. Very much a regular thing for him. It's about 2:45 that afternoon, middle of the day. Leaving, heading up Whitmore, Shawn makes it to the store, grabs his root beer, sits in the parking lot of the store for a moment, and chugs it down. This will be the last time Shawn makes this casual trip to the store. Somewhere between Lee and Maltby Road, near US 23, on his way back home, Shawn vanishes. I should note here that this area of the town was quite populated, with people milling about all over the place, traffic coming and going. Today, if you drove by the area, you'd see what we see in every large suburban region in the country. Costco, Texas Roadhouse, Kohl's, Holiday Inn, on and on. Shawn's disappearance is an ugly image of the era. The absence of CCTV and cell phones certainly made the conditions conducive to kidnapping. Think the man with the candy or the lost puppy scenario. It didn't happen often, but when it did, the story had a familiar ring to it. A kid on his bike or walking, making his or her way home from the store or school or a friend's house, swiped off the street in the middle of the day. Part of the fear was the leeway parents gave their kids. Get out of the house and don't come back until the sun goes down. One of the first things I noticed when I was researching today's episode was several of the same comments associated with this case. I didn't know this boy, but I felt like I did. Shawn could have been any one of us from that time, which makes this case and all that is about to happen hit on an entire deeper level than many of the cases I cover. We can instantly relate. We see ourselves in Shawn and the circumstances. It is one reason why a story like this, with the incredible events that are about to unfold, it hurts so much. When Shawn doesn't come home, his parents sound the alarm bells. They know Shawn would never take off on his own or duck out with friends and not let them know. And look, part of this is paternal instinct, intuition, whatever you want to call it. As a parent, you just know something is different. Something is wrong. Even at such a young age, Shawn's brother later told the local Livingston Daily newspaper, "I remember Shawn's kindness and his environmentalism." Shawn had a deep concern for animals, his brother added, along with an absolute love and concern for the environment at a time before it was fashionable to be green. Shawn's love for the environment developed during the summers he spent at the family's second home in the Upper Peninsula, which is way up in the northern part of Michigan along the Canadian border. At just 13 years old, Shawn had already developed a sense of protecting animals and the wilderness. He was already talking to his parents about the ethical treatment of animals by pharmaceutical companies and medical schools while testing drugs and treatments. He had built himself what he called a nature platform in the trees at the summer house so he could sit and study nature. Shawn's parents, Bud and Sharon Moore, were your typical middle-class, hardworking family with 3 kids, Shawn being the youngest. Shawn dreamed of being an inventor. He liked to tease family and friends. He hugged people, which I found incredibly sincere and loving, showing Shawn's genial nature of being a deeply empathetic young person. Shawn Moore cared about people, and he let them know about it. And so on that Labor Day weekend in 1985, when Shawn fails to come back from the store after getting his root beer, his family is well aware of the fact that they need to do something. Witnesses soon come forward and report seeing Shawn sitting at the store next to his 10-speed bike drinking his root beer. So it's clear he made it to the store. Shawn also knew he needed to be back home, not only to finish cutting the lawn, but his brother had told him earlier in the day that family dinner was going to be early. And afterward, they were all going to sit down together and watch a movie at 7 o'clock. Meanwhile, as Shawn was sitting at the store enjoying his root beer, a man in a Jeep is slowly trolling through the neighborhood. And I want to try to understand this, for the sake of trying to step inside the mind of the sociopaths and psychopaths we cover on this show. We are going to learn a lot about this guy's motivation and mindset in this episode, more than is generally available. So, after finishing his root beer, Shawn gets on his bike and begins pedaling back home, now heading up Whitmore Lake Road. At the same time Shawn is on his way home from the store, this predator trolling the area later admits to having these, quote, uncontrollable impulses to kidnap people that are now overwhelming him. And he adds, I didn't know if it was anger or if I did it for sex or what I did it 4. We'll be right back. The quote ending that last segment, in which this man speaks of uncontrollable impulses to kidnap, I want to focus on that just for a minute. You know, if you are of the mindset that you have such overwhelming impulses, and you understand them, and you eventually act out on them, you are also aware of the fact that you can speak to someone about them instead of acting out. So I am not going to accept that this impulse of his was uncontrollable. Bullshit. In telling us what was going through his mind, he is essentially saying he understood clearly what was going on inside of him, but he failed to act on at least trying to control it. Earlier that same day, the man now driving around searching for his next victim had reached out to his girlfriend and asked her if she wanted to go to her family's Gladwin, Michigan cottage to hang out. She told him no, she was too busy. He then asks his cousins, according to what he says later, if they would go with him to the cottage, which was a 2.5-hour drive up into the northeast part of the state. His cousins were busy as well, as were friends and other family members that he asks. So he found himself bored and alone. This guy lives in Livonia, which is basically in the immediate metro area of Detroit, about a 40-minute drive east of Green Oak Township, where he is now trolling around a random neighborhood in search of a victim. Before he made it into that neighborhood where Shawn just happens to be riding his bike home from the store, he had first stopped by the Brighton Mall nearby. He got out of his Jeep and began walking around. Quickly, he spots a young boy inside the entrance to the mall. The boy is standing in the vestibule, reading flyers posted on the bulletin board. There's a motorcycle for sale the boy is interested in, and our creeper here walks up and stands behind the boy as he is looking at the flyer. I have a motorcycle on a trailer, the man says to the boy. You want to see it? There it is. The man with the candy, the lost puppy. The predator is effective at adapting to any situation and uses that motorcycle on a trailer ruse to try to lure the boy. The boy is creeped out and says no and walks away. The creeper watches as the young blonde boy disappears into the mall around a corner out of sight. So he gets back in his Jeep, leaves, and just after 3 p.m. finds himself exiting the highway not far away and driving through that neighborhood where Shawn is now riding his bike home. I often mention fate on this show. Here you have one boy who is inside a mall and he senses a wacko asking him to take a look at a motorcycle on a trailer. He walks away, and our creeper decides to leave it there, likely because there were so many potential witnesses around. And then we have Shawn, who just happens to be riding his bike home at the same time this son of a bitch takes a random exit off the highway, travels into a neighborhood he's never been in, and begins to hunt for a more practical victim. Off the freeway into the neighborhood, the man drove past the Pump and Pantry gas station corner store, where he first saw Shawn Moore drinking his root beer in the parking lot. And look, that's where this creep's obsession for Shawn begins. This man, whose name is public, but I want to just hold off for as long as I can before using it, he follows Shawn as he set off on his bike down Whitmore. When Shawn enters what the man later describes as a quiet section of Whitmore, with seemingly no one around, he actually drives up and approaches Shawn. It is now 3:25 p.m. Shawn pulls his bike over to the side of the road, stops, looks. "Hi," the man says. Then, "I'm not going to hurt you. The two of us are going to have a good time this weekend."
That is just so creepy to use that kind of language, like we're going to have a good time with a teenager.
Beyond creepy, Catherine. It's in the realm of evil. That's the lovely voice of my executive producer, Catherine Law. Just think about this scene for a moment. How many of us have been Shawn, out there on our bikes, riding home from a friend's or the store in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, and some piece of shit scumbag is out there trolling, following us? It's beyond terrifying. I have received in the realm of, 100 emails and letters from listeners over the years describing this exact situation. And they got away, obviously. It's just so disturbing and scary to even think about. A witness later reports seeing, at the exact time of the day, quote, a father and son arguing on Whitmore, which was definitely Shawn and his kidnapper. So we know Shawn tried to fight this creep off. The man is bigger and stronger, though, and I call him a man, but he is actually in his mid-20s. Anyway, he grabs Shawn by his arms, spins him around, gets him in a good chokehold as Shawn's bike falls to the ground. He then forces Shawn into his silver Jeep Renegade, which is running with the door open. He closes the door, jumps in, and takes off with Shawn by his side. The creeper hops onto the highway and begins driving north. Apparently, he has kidnapped someone to go up to that cabin with him, because that's where they're heading. Along the way to the cabin, which is, remember, 130 miles north, the man later says he and Shawn talk about music and how they both play instruments. He makes it sound as though they are old buddies, heading north for a weekend of fishing, just talking about life. There is no doubt this creep is instead threatening Shawn with the standard pedophile fear tactic of, "I'll kill you and your family if you try anything." Inside the cabin that evening, the man makes Shawn macaroni and cheese. They drink beer together, the man claims. A later toxicology report, however, proves that Shawn had a sedative in his system. So, following the standard pedophile predator playbook, the man drugged him. I just want to say this next part is going to be hard to hear. And yet, it's part of this case. We need to hear it. After drugging Shawn, the creeper places an elastic band around Shawn's neck before fastening a belt around the plastic band and tightening the belt until Shawn is dead. Next, he rapes Shawn. Then he dumps his body in the woods near the cabin. While that horror show is going on at the cabin, back in the neighborhood where Shawn was snatched, a guy on his way to visit his daughter at a nearby hospital comes forward. He explains that as he drove by Whitmore, he just happened to spot Shawn's kidnapper forcing the boy into his Jeep Renegade. The guy says he was so scared for the boy, he drove around, flagged down a police officer he came across, and told him what he had just witnessed. His exact words, "I think I just saw a kidnapping." They dispatch officers to the scene immediately, who begin a search and within a few minutes find Shawn's bike on the side of the road with tire tracks nearby. The area where Shawn was abducted had a dirt section of roadway. After Shawn's family reports him missing, they put two and two together and figure out that Shawn is likely the boy the guy saw being kidnapped. The state police bring in canines, yet they are only able to track a scent for a few yards before it goes cold, which, added to those tire tracks, is evidence that Shawn has been taken away in a vehicle. This leads to the media getting involved. A widespread search gets underway quickly. Everyone is talking about what happened, and groups of people from the community are now out looking for Shawn. Another witness, a woman traveling north on US 23, comes forward and reports seeing a silver Jeep Renegade parked near a boy on a bike. She even brings cops down to a local Jeep dealership and points out the exact same vehicle she had seen. This is a huge break. They now have a make and model of the vehicle seen taking Shawn away. A few days go by. Nothing seems to be happening, even with the ID of the Jeep. So the same woman helps police with a sketch. Law enforcement released the sketch of a young-looking blonde dude. From that, flyers are posted and handed out with the sketch and a picture of a silver Jeep Renegade. Shawn's school picture is also on the flyer. And I must interject something here. I have seen similar cases like this go in the opposite direction, where witnesses are viewed as hysterical and unreliable and written off. Here, law enforcement listens, reacts, doesn't judge, and responds. In other words, they follow and interpret the evidence. 2 weeks and 2,000 tips later, a huge break. As police sift through all of those tips coming in, a common denominator emerges. 5 of the tips are focused on one guy, Ronald Lloyd Bailey. One of those 5 tips is actually from a police officer in Bailey's hometown, who had once arrested Bailey when he was 16 years old. Bailey had kidnapped, drugged, and sexually assaulted a 12-year-old before strangling the boy and leaving him for dead. The boy survived. Now police have a name, which they pop into the system. Bailey, now 26, owns a silver Jeep Renegade. Bam! They got their man. No doubt about it. I mean, let's say if the police, and look, I've said this many times on this show, but if police simply follow procedure and do not allow their biases and feelings and personal thoughts to inject themselves into an investigation, crimes can be solved a bit more easily. It's human nature that fucks shit up. I have to add here, as I sense a bit of rage building inside me about this, that the abduction and rape and attempted murder the dude committed at 16, well, that was not Bailey's first. When he was just 13, Bailey tried kidnapping a younger boy. He was caught. He served time in a boys' detention center for that crime and was let out. That next incident, at 16, sent him to a psychiatric hospital, but again, he was allowed to leave after several years. Needs to be said here that they allowed a 2-time kidnapper with a penchant for sexually abusing his victims, who nearly murdered one boy, to be released, which I find incredibly destructive to society. That was when and where Shawn's fate was sealed. The day they let that guy out of that hospital. He had, remember, drugged, sexually assaulted, and strangled a 12-year-old boy. He showed society who he is and will always be. There is no cure here, no treatment that can put the kibosh on his addiction. These types of creeps need to be locked up and kept locked up until we can figure out how to medicate or contain the impulses driving them. They all reoffend in some way. Can we stop trying to act as though this is a treatable condition and that good behavior in a hospital constitutes rehabilitation? Can we stop listening to doctors at these psychiatric hospitals who sign off on the release of offenders they know damn well will only reoffend? Can we...
Whoa. I gotta stop you there, Phelps.
You disagree?
Actually, we just need to take a break.
Oh, sorry. We'll be right back. Apologies for that last rant, but you look at these cases in depth, as I do, and you see the same result from the same behaviors and the choices psychiatrists, judges, and parole boards make time and again, It unnerves you. The analogy that comes to mind is lighting a bomb and tossing it into a crowd. You know most likely that bomb will explode. But there is the off chance the wick will malfunction. We need to go with the percentage of the wick 99.9% of the time working. These men tell us what is going on in their minds, and we don't listen. It doesn't take long to find Bailey, his Jeep, and witnesses within his circle of family and friends and coworkers, tagging him as a strange dude who does weird shit. Like a coworker who explains that she saw him cleaning his Jeep that Tuesday night after Shawn went missing. He was detailing it. So she asks him, what's up with that? Because he just wasn't a guy who kept things all that clean. He responds by saying that, well, I'm headed out to a wedding on a Tuesday night. Search warrants are signed for Bailey's residence. They then find his girlfriend, who reports that he had asked her to go out to the family cabin that past weekend, but she declined. This leads police, of course, to the cabin. As investigators head up to the cabin, other law enforcement bring Bailey in for questioning. He says he was fishing all that Labor Day weekend in a town called Caseville with a friend. Well, they ask the friend. He says, well, no, that fishing trip never happened. So they hold on to Bailey. But where is Shawn? Where is the evidence to put this animal Bailey in jail? With a warrant in hand, they begin searching the cabin. As they are ripping that cabin apart looking for any evidence that Shawn was inside, guess what Bailey does? He is released, so they follow him. He goes to the ATM and withdraws a bunch of cash, boards a plane to Florida. He makes it to Ocala with the FBI now tailing his every move. Back at the cabin, the state police interview a neighbor. They show him a photo of Shawn. The neighbor places Shawn at the cabin, telling investigators he saw Shawn hanging clothes on a clothesline outside the cabin. Then another neighbor says he saw Bailey late that same weekend, sitting on top of his Jeep, smoking a cigarette. So they ask, hey, where was that? The neighbor takes them to that part of the wooded area and shows them. They begin searching for Shawn. Meanwhile, they find a palm print matching Shawn's inside the cabin. Bailey is done. As they search for Shawn, about 50 feet from where Bailey was seen sitting on top of his Jeep, smoking a cigarette, a cop walks into the brush and he is startled by a flock of vultures scattering and flying away. Not a good sign. They go into the area, and there is Shawn, nude, his body lying on top of the ground. Back in Florida, Bailey is tipped off while listening to a police scanner. Bailey now knows that the FBI are onto him, and so he takes off. About 250 law enforcement gather and begin searching for him. Prosecutor David Morse, now with an arrest warrant for murder in hand, later tells the Livingston Daily, a paper that covered this case in great depth with incredible, accurate reporting, quote, "The next thing you know, they're slugging through the swamps of Florida. It was high drama. It takes 2 days to flush this sleazy reptile of a human being out of the swamp, but they eventually arrest Bailey." Bailey's trial is distressing and, well, predictable. His defense blames the psychiatrist who agreed to Bailey's release back when he went into that hospital as a teen. They even allege that the psychiatrist and Bailey had a homosexual relationship. They could not locate that psychiatrist for trial testimony, of course. Dr. Joel Dreyer, a new psychiatrist, wound up testifying on Bailey's behalf and actually compares Bailey to Norman Bates from the classic Hitchcock film Psycho. He says Bailey is schizophrenic and that although he may appear to be like a normal person, he is quite psychotic. I don't think anyone in that room at the time thought that he appeared to be a normal person. But schizophrenic and crazy? I don't think so. Bailey testifies on his own behalf in great detail, almost as if he enjoys the retelling of all the things that he had done. At one point, he says this: I tightened the belt on Shawn's neck and strangled him because my whole past just came rushing into my head, and I thought Shawn was me and I had to kill me. I'll call that what it is. Bullshit. He knew enough to kidnap and kill Shawn. He knew enough to run and to try to escape justice. He may have personality disorders and psychopathy is definitely involved, but he knew damn well what he was doing. He knew right and wrong. His attorney, Raymond Cassar, later says this: the man was truly remorseful for his actions. I never saw him as an evil person, but rather a truly misguided soul. Misguided soul. It's an affront, and it's disrespectful to Shawn. I won't even rant about that comment because it's just so damn stupid. In 1986, Bailey is found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. The judge calls him, rightly so, a cold, calculated predator who chose to do evil, and sentenced him to life. He will never hurt anyone on the outside again. Bailey is suspected in 2 Florida abductions and murders, as well as additional murder-abduction cases in Michigan. Shawn's headstone in St. Patrick Calvary Cemetery is inscribed, quote, son, brother, friend, smiling, hugging, teasing. Mr. Peabody, mouse, inventor, artist, biker, fun-loving. Shawn's parents, I think it's important to note, stayed married and united until in 2011, Shawn's father, Bud, passed away at the age of 85. And just 2 months later, at 78, his mother, Sharon, died. I think that shows how much love this family had for one another. Let's end it here this week. Be safe, be aware, and please subscribe to this podcast. Big stuff is coming, I promise. Sources for today's episode: Remembering Shawn Moore 30 Years Later by Buddy Morehouse. Livingston Daily, August 31st, 2020. Abduction in Broad Daylight by Lisa Roos Church. Livingston Daily, August 31st, 2015. I also used various police reports, trial transcripts, and appeal petitions. Crossing the Line is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Talk Boom Productions. Written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps, with Catherine Law. Audio mixing and mastering by Matt Russell.